Yeah, that'll be seen in what I'm presenting here. So let's go through this, okay? Thank you. Um, Regarding the introduction, the theses are these. Thesis number one, the small congregation has been the dominant institutional expression of Protestant Christianity in North America. The idea of a megachurch is, I think, a 20th century thing, a late 20th century thing. Most congregations are not that large, whatever that means. I mean, I think it used to be the rule in the United Methodist Church that once a congregation reaches 300 members, that congregation needs to plant a new church, which is why if you go into some small cities and towns in America, you'll see First Methodist Church right downtown. And then there's a Second Methodist Church that's called Second Methodist Church on the outer banks of the city or in the township or something. 300 might have been considered a small congregation, but in our situation, we are far below that at this point in time. Yeah.
I don't know if it's generally true among the Methodists like it is among the Baptists, but second churches were not second because they were planted by the first ones. They were second churches because they were black.
Because of what?
They were
Yeah.
black.
Yeah.
So if you go into Medina, the Second Baptist is the black church. First Baptist is the white.
Yeah, at Ashland Seminary, at that excellence program that we were in. In my group with Walter, 330 pounds, and he was the pastor of Second St. Peter Missionary Baptist Church in Detroit, and that was the black church. And so, yeah,
I
I
don't
think you're
know
right.
if it's generally true among the Methodists in the same way.
It may have changed, but that's the way
You said the second.
my reading said that. Okay. Thesis number two is, today the societal context for the small congregation has changed from supportive to neutral to, in many places, a hostile environment. Now, that's what I wrote and found out in 1995, but if you read the Lutheran Witness, if you read that, what is it? More than 50% of the congregations in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod average less than 100 in worship. And I think 40% even more, less than 50. So that's what's happening. Now, I don't know if it's a hostile environment that I don't think so, but there's maybe a push for congregations to dissolve, but not in our context. But we have a different polity. Thesis three, the small church has a bright and promising future if it is willing to adapt to a new role in a changing future. Okay, so those are the theses here. Any comments before we move on? Okay, the assumptions behind these theses are the following. The small church is not a miniature version of the large congregation. Maybe it doesn't need to be said, but it's obvious that we small congregations are not like the large congregations. There's a difference between those kinds of congregations. Number two, the small church naturally tends to be the dominant institutional expression of Protestant Christianity in North America. As I was traveling through the rural section of Stark County and then coming into Summit and Wayne, and I look at the churches, just look at the buildings, you would say those are small churches, and that's in the Protestant context. So again, that is reinforcing thesis one. Number 3, what I had given to the pastors that day was by the year 2020, that was the date, congregations averaging fewer than 100 at worship will represent at least 40% of all U.S. and Canadian Protestant churches. And that's, I think that prophecy was fulfilled. In fact, it's probably higher than 40% these days. Probably more than 50% are averaging less than 100. Number 4, a growing proportion of small congregations will depend on bivocational pastors and ministerial teams. The only bivocational pastor we have is Kevin.
And I don't fit that mold.
And you're not.
The way it's originally designed.
Yeah, a person working in a secular field.
I have a retirement check. If I didn't
Yeah.
have a retirement check, I would have to have it.
When we were looking at calling a pastor, when Resurrection was being started, and I was the founding pastor for that congregation, and we said the congregation could not afford a full-time pastor. So we got the call document ready to send to the council of presidents, whatever, and we asked for a bivocational, a worker priest, as it were. And it turned out that there were no candidates at either seminary who had indicated that they would be open to a worker priest call, except Kevin.
Yeah, essentially I don't even think that question exists on that document or the document, thing we fill out before we get our calls. They called me in, they said, would you, obviously they knew my background.
You were the only one. And praise the Lord, we got Kevin into our district and so forth. Number 5, merger with another small congregation should not have a high priority, and neither should disbanding or closing or dissolving. We have one dual parish in our circuit, Grace and Holy Trinity, right? And so, our brother John is a dual parish pastor. Others, that are, low in membership are just continuing to exist the way they are. And so what I have here is not a recommendation nor a hope about bivocational pastors or dual parishes. But you can see there were a number of dual parishes in the synod, and I see, if you read the Lutheran Witness and the Reporter, you'll see from different districts, primarily out west, in the central states, where such and such a church and such a church have, come to an agreement to call one pastor to serve both congregations. So, is that going to be happening more and more? I don't know. Number 6. Okay. Merger with another small congregation should not have a high priority, and neither should disbanding or closing or dissolving. The assumption here is that congregation can continue to exist the way they are without going that route. But number 6, numerical growth should never be the top priority for the small church that has been in existence for a decade or longer. Rather, the number 1 priority should be planned change from within the organization. And again, the Lutheran logic, change, but anyway. Small congregations probably in their head and maybe in their discussions talk about, we need to grow. We need to grow, we're down to membership. But the idea here is that numerical growth should not be the issue. And we'll talk about that later on here. That, word and sacrament are being provided, okay, and that doesn't mean that we don't proclaim in the community. But we have to change, and I can see that in my congregation. When I got there, still some ethnic stuff there. A small group of, families, and they thought of themselves as a small church. And as we were growing, conversions happening, people coming in with the preschool and all that kind of stuff. Those people they felt very afraid of what was going on here. This is not the little church we had before. We're growing. Oh no. And then we did grow. And with some conflicts in there because these new people are changing things. And now, as I minister to our people in Massillon, they're thinking, we got to grow. We've got to grow. We got to do what we were doing in the 90s well. Or they think of it that we're now a large church and we have to do what we used to do in the 90s, but that's not happening. So they have to change their attitude about what is important. And what we'll see, and I don't want to get into it yet, but community outreach or service to the community or something like that. Yes.
I was reading out, or I was saying, that the Heaven's Foundation has an 80-year lifespan, that around 50 years is when they have to make that change. And if they don't, they have to make more radical change as you get down to the end.
Yeah. I had heard 100-year span is the average church, and then they go down and decline or whatever, or no longer exist. And you can see a lot. You read it, don't you? In the Lutheran Witness, this congregation has dissolved, so forth. That's happening. But it's change, not numerical growth. It's what can we do in service to our neighbor, and so forth. Number 7, if the goal is numerical growth, the leaders should accept that they will be competing with other congregations for prospective new members. As I leave church on Sunday, and I could get home before noon, and I pass a couple of mega churches on the way back to my condo, and those parking lots are full. And the last summer I would leave because we had an early church. We had an earlier worship service time in the summertime. I would leave at 10 o'clock, 10:30, and just drive around Massillon and the townships outside. And I would go to the Catholic church. There are 3 big Catholic churches right now in Massillon. One is a cathedral. The other 2 are big. There's one priest that the bishop of the Youngstown, Canton, Massillon diocese has determined. And the guy is 80 years old. He's serving 3 parishes. Hardly any cars in the parking lot in the Catholic church. Yet I drive by the mega church and they're just full. People, now why are they going to those non-denominational evangelical churches? That's where they're at. The parking lot is full. Well, okay. Well, and so that's the reality. So all of us, traditional churches, denominations, have been declining in the recent times.
Is it possible that the issue, I come from Portland, and there was 30 or 40% Lutheran to much larger Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that when the Lutheran Catholics married each pay, they dropped out of the church. They didn't go to one or the other, they just dropped out. Maybe we have destroyed ourselves through competition.
You may be right.
We're better than you. No, we're better than you.
Yeah. Well, we are not going to be, we can't compete with the mega churches in a sense, can we? Hold to our confession and, our liturgy and so forth and serve the Lord. But we'll get into that, what can be done later on. 8, effective pastoral service in a small church requires a different set of gifts, skills, priorities, and personal characteristics that are required to be the effective senior pastor of a large congregation. Different skill sets, different gifts, or just a change. I've seen the way I've changed in the last couple of years in a smaller church. In one sense, it's a good thing because I am relating more directly and more often than I did when we were growing back in the 90s. It was a different set of skills, and I relished that. Number one, what Chris does in his church, that's a small church thing that you're doing. Singing happy birthday, pointing out, that disabled individual, acknowledge him, and people, relate to all that and celebrate that. And there's more in fellowship, relationships. I got the complaints from the old timers back in the 90s. Who are these people coming in? I don't even know who they are. Well, why don't you go up and talk to them? And they say, who are those strangers? That was a word that I heard a lot in those days. Who are those strangers? Oh, you mean Luann and John Gotch? He's the president of the congregation. And Luann is, a teacher and choir member. They're members of our family. Oh, really? To get that family idea and family in a smaller church, you have an opportunity to really be a family. Yeah.
So it occurs to me that yesterday we were talking about the notion that residential seminary-based education is the so-called gold standard for pastoral training. And yet, a couple of decades ago, there was an acknowledgement by pastors of extremely large churches that so-called gold standard was the standard for basic congregational ministry. And they established this thing called Pastoral Leadership Institute,
PLI, yes.
whose initial goal was to say, we need to be able to say, there's a special kind of training that is necessary if you're going to be a pastor in a very large church.
Growing, large.
Beyond what the seminary is providing. We never had, and whatever you might think of the PLI and how it's developed and that's throughout the years, we've never had a comparable training program that said, let us acknowledge that there's a very specialized set of skills, gifts, and training that is necessary to lead very small congregations. So even as our congregations are in the point of we have less than 100 people in worship, we continue to place vicars in congregations that are somewhere that are either in the large congregations or in the mid-range congregations. Small congregations are never able to provide training opportunities for vicarage. So we've never had anything comparable to PLM or pastors.
That is true. That's true.
We just have said, you figure it out.
You figure it out. Good point.
Well, there's also our system. The problem with our system is that we look at rewarding people below the foundation.
Mhm.
And therefore, you do 4 years, you're saying to yourself, I don't want a small congregation that's just gonna pay me a little bit. Especially when I come out of the seminary, as my son did, with $100,000 in debt.
Mhm.
How can you want a small congregation?
Sure.
You want larger and larger and larger.
Absolutely.
And that means there's a rapid turnover. What was it, the first seminary came out recently, I heard 10 years ago, it was a year and a half, and they'd be moving on to another congregation.
About 2 years.
2 years? Yeah.
Most men didn't make it to 5 years and they got there.
You know, I was a mentor, as Chris was, for the PALS program, you know, 3 years, the guys coming out of the SEM, and then going to the PALS group and all that. There was a movement, and they stopped it. The movement was, now that they finished the 3 years of the PALS program, there needs to be another grouping for people, pastors from 5 to 10 years, because the amount of resignations, just leaving the ministry, is in that crucial time from the 4th year to the 10th year. And so there's a lot of what? Regret or sadness about what they've seen now in the ministry. It does not look like it was going, that I had looked forward to. It's totally different, the pressure and stuff like that. I think, Chris brings up a great point, how do we do that? Well, we are taught to serve what? As shepherds, proclaiming the gospel and, administering the sacraments and pastoral care, as a shepherd to the sheep. We're very good at that, I believe, as Lutheran pastors. But it's a different environment now in a smaller congregation because of the things that are going on and the sadness in some people, the members too, they get concerned about where we're going and what's happening. So, but finishing up about the criteria for staff, number 9, the most influential criteria for evaluating staff in a small church often include interpersonal relationships, depth of personal Christian commitment, instant availability, and I added a number D, willingness to focus on parishioners' agenda. What you were saying, Dave, before about in a small church, you got the matriarchs and patriarchs. And, now we are the theologians in the congregation, so there may be people who lead, and they may have their own agendas, and this is what we want to do. But when it comes to, theology and the doctrines and just the way that we are organized to serve as, the bride of Christ in this community, pastors are in that as a leader, as a teacher.
I also noticed, though, when I went into my first church, that these girls, Lutheran guys, were marrying Methodist girls. And they were bringing into the parish their Methodist priest, the thinking. And that was, as much as we'd like to say we are the ones that set the standards, that ain't necessarily so at times.
That's true. Which is why perhaps we need to be, better educated to do stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Just skills in interpersonal relationships. right now, fellas, I have the time to interact with my members more than I could back in the 90s, running here and there and everywhere, baptisms and new members and a Life with God class, a parenting class, this class, 3 Bible classes during the week and stuff like that, and meeting people and all that. And then administering a larger church. I was the only guy there. We couldn't afford a vicar. They had asked my predecessor, John Casera, do you want a vicar? And he said, no, we got to build this sanctuary. You've been in our church. We have to build the second bit of the plan, the blueprint for the congregation. So forget that. I'll take care of everything. We'll just got to build that building. And then the fathers of the church wanted to pay off the mortgage for that sanctuary very quickly. So when I got there, it's like, my gosh, of the annual budget, almost half of the budget was going for mortgage. Well, how could you get a vicar then? How could you do this and that? If you want, the congregation said they wanted to grow. Well, how are we going to grow if we're just going to be stifled by 50% of our budget going to pay the mortgage just to get it done? Before the old timers died, they wanted it paid off, no debt anymore. Well, yeah, but yeah, I'm enjoying the interpersonal relationships that I didn't have back in the day. Anyway, okay. This is the number 10 is the last in this set. I'm sorry. Instant availability is C.
Okay, how about D?
Depth of personal Christian commitment. Those should be applied to any pastor, I suppose. And then D, willingness to focus on parishioners' agenda. I mean, our church in Pleasant City, we got, a small church, what 15 people worship now these days, 12 to 15. And there's three people, two basically, who pretty much what? They administer the congregation to keep it alive. Christine and Larry, right? And we pastors who go there, I send them sermons three times a month, give them hymns and prayers and all that kind of stuff. And then George and Chris go down there, right? But you acquiesce to what they're saying and doing, right?
Yeah, I think there's more to it than that in terms of the small church willingness to focus on Christian agenda. I remember years ago, at Holy Cross in Merritt, Paul Hoyer, and his team were saying, we need to have policy-based governance because the church was big enough that they couldn't, that they were just getting yanked around by everybody's personal agendas. So one person would come in and want them to do this, another next one would come in and want to do that. And they ended up going to policy-based governance so that they said, this is what we are going to do. Don't ask us to do something else. So which for the sake of sanity in a larger organization, you've got to do that. But
More structure.
more structure, but in smaller congregations.
Yeah. Yes, that was, for me, in the 80s and 90s, St. John. Structure, we got to follow the policies. And some of the old timers, I remember a smaller church during the Depression and World War II, they ran the show, and it was very kind of loose and all that. But with a church that's growing, we had to have policies. We had and not just have them, but follow the policies so that the church could be running well, so forth.
I have heard that there's a change in the leadership role of the pastor from 1900 to today because of the change in upheaval. That back then, it was the matriarchs and patriarchs that held the families together and kept them in the church. And that's why a pastor could handle congregations of 800, 1,000, and so forth. But today, they want the pastor to be available to each of them.
A personal pastor, yeah.
Yeah, and we don't have the ability to be available to everybody.
In a large church. And don't, I could recall having pangs of regret because, who do I go to? This person has a problem, but this person is coming in and, they need to be transferred or whatever, or life with God, or this. And yeah, the accessibility. And again, I had a family too. And, there were, pressures on that end. So it got a little, heavy. But today, in a sense, I have more time to do what I need to do, okay, in a smaller church. Okay. Then the last one in this set here, number 10, a decreasing proportion of regular churchgoers display a preference for the small church. Maybe in these days, that may be a cliche, I don't know. People want to go to a bigger church. But those who prefer the small church, whether this is true or not today, I don't know. In 1995, I put down people born before 1940. I think there are some people who were born before 1950 who would prefer a smaller church. I don't know. Now B. So it's older people. An older couple or person would like a smaller church, but born before 1950. I'll change that to 1950.
There's another reason for large churches, and that is what happened in a congregation I served. The chairman and his wife got upset, and they went to the large church because they could get mass there.
Yeah. And in a small church, people have to, what? Work. They're going to be involved, whereas in a larger church. Also, this is a more, as I'm looking today, not back to this stuff, but, in a Catholic church where there may be thousands of parishioners, okay, and not everybody does a whole lot of work, they can get lost in there. And in the mega churches too. And those pastors don't serve their people as we do. We have our what? Our membership, the souls that we are responsible for. I'm not so sure in those mega churches that people just come in and that they've never met the pastor. The pastor does not know who they are. So they can come and go. And then they have a staff that does everything and gathering people. So I think, and the whole Baptist line is that the church is a volunteer structure. It's individual. It's my personal faith. You hear them talk like that. I have a personal relationship with Jesus, and that's good. And I like to go to that church because it's interesting or whatever. But it's a volunteer association. Whereas our understanding from Scripture is that our Lutheran Church is not a volunteer association like the Rotary Club or the Lions Club. We are what? We are a what? Family. The church is the bride of Christ. And the men and women of the church are members of the church. They're brothers and sisters of Christ, right? And children of the Father, and so forth. It's a family. I would think that if people were looking for that kind of a church where we're family and not just a volunteer group, that there could be, a turnaround in our congregations. And the culture, maybe the culture is, wanting that, but I'm not sure right now.
One of the thoughts that I've had on that also is, I think our social media has affected the way people think about being with people. For example, how many likes do you have? You build up your likes and all that. So you want to be with a lot of people that they can find lots of likes. And that the younger people really that I talk to really are into large congregations because they want a lot of likes. Just a thought.
Okay, that's a good one, yeah. Going on. Place, no, they didn't. They place relationships above quality of ministry. In a smaller church, it's the quality of the relationships. That's the main point there.
And therefore, if you upset one family, you not only lose that family, but you lose the children or you lose the parents.
Yes. That's true too. Good point. And number C, I think that this might relate to small churches that are not, like maybe, Christian Science, the Universalist kind of thing. Adults of liberal ideas, liberal theology, they might like the small churches. D, I don't know, I forget D. That's, just cross out D. The last one is adults who grew up in a small church. They would like to go to a smaller church, probably in the rural communities. So those are the people that would go to a small church, people who grew up in a small church. That ends the first part of, the handout. Any other comments, questions, or anything? Then the second one, we can go through this really pretty fast, I think. Just let me, go through it here. I could not really wrap my head around the research that I found that the larger churches tend to emphasize the first table of the law, loving God and so forth. Whereas the smaller church has a more of a relationship and a lifestyle in that parish of the second table of the law, love your neighbor. And let me just give you the number 1, 2, and 3 here about that, the essential characteristics of the small church. See if this doesn't fit where you're at. This model represents an extended family. So the parish is an extended family. And see, in a sense, that really does jive with our whole biblical understanding of what the church is. It's a family. It's not a voluntary association. Okay. Number 2, it basically follows the Cheers model. The old sitcom, Cheers. Yeah, that's it, that's A. Everybody is glad you came, that's A. B, everyone is known by name. And C, our troubles are all the same. A small church can do that. I don't know how they can do that in a large church.
They're not all the same, they all feel it.
They feel it.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a small church.
Yes.
So even though Uncle Bill is having a hard time, the rest of the church is there with him.
Yeah. Back in the day, at my place, there were lots of people, a lot of hospital calls and all that. I had 35, 40 shut-ins at one time. But today, when so-and-so is in the hospital, so-and-so is at home, so-and-so has been going for surgery and rehab, our people are on the dot, sending cards on their own volition, without anybody saying anything. There is a stronger bond between the members, and that's wonderful. And without, when I was not in a rehab center after my chemo and radiation treatments in 2022, but I was weekend at home, and on their own volition, they would just bring little, things to eat, meal, or bring it to my door, and all that kind of stuff, and my kids or whatever would come and get it out of the mailbox or whatever, the front porch, and come. I had to live on the second floor of my house. I couldn't move anywhere downstairs, go down the stairs. And then when I was with the sepsis, this was the worst. This is why I'm still recovering. That sepsis just blew me away. And I was in a rehab center for 3 months, and not only the pastors, and even, Wally flew in to see me, and also who was it, Don Hayes and Tom Soltis. In one fell swoop, he came. And, Chris, all of that. But then all of a sudden, there were members of the congregation coming to see me in the rehab center. And I was blown away. I filled up a basket of cards that were sent to me during those times. And what I found, and people don't maybe know that, but I found out other people are getting cards from our members now. That was not happening in the 90s. It's happening now, that kind of bond in the congregation. Okay, then number 3, the small church for many is the third place. Now, I don't know what this means. I don't agree with everything I put down here. What does this mean? For many, the first place in their lives is their home, their family. The second is their job. And the third is then the place where they love to be because they're being accepted, and that would be the church. So, 1/2 to 2/3 of today's members identify their small church as the number 1 third place in their lives. So that, because they see the relationships. Again, it's the second table of the law. Now, that does not mean they don't have a strong relationship with the Lord. I'm just saying that bond is strong. Okay? Any comments on that?
Yeah, if I remember when you originally were talking about this third place idea, it came from a book that was saying the church is no longer that third place for a lot of people because in a day, in an age where in our society, that third place of being accepted might be with the soccer team, or it might be with the dance team, or it might be with the marching band, or it might be with
That was
the
happening
choirs
then.
and boosters, or it might be a whole bunch of other things. Whereas in the past, when our parents were young, they didn't have all that stuff. It was home, work, and church.
Oh, yeah. My grandparents' group, my grandpa and grandma, they were married to the church. They would serve the church. Everybody lived in the neighborhood close to the church, and so forth. And there weren't those outside activities that took up people's time. But in 1995, I was worried about that. It's gotten even worse in terms of this, that, and the other. Now there's not only just boys baseball and soccer, now there's girls baseball and soccer. There's dance competitions at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. So, yeah, it's gotten even worse, yeah.
What does that say, though, about God's God above all things?
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, it's almost like for many of those people, prefer the larger mega church, because they can just go and come in and they hide in the crowd.
Who knows what they become?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how many people have you heard who says, I believe in Jesus, I have a personal relationship with Jesus, so I don't really need to go to church. Have you heard that? And those mega churches are allowing that. Well, we still are what? I mean, this past year, we removed a lot of people from our membership who have, for years, decades even. We finally did what we needed to do, but we did it in love and say, you're still a prospect, but we can't keep you on our membership anymore. Blah, blah, blah. Tell us what your relationship to this congregation is. I'd like to hear. Well, guess how many responded? None. So I think some people they would prefer to just go whenever they want to, like once a year. Okay?
Right.
Twice. Easter. Yeah. And Christmas. Okay. I think, though, I think because of the culture, there has to be a turnaround somewhere. We baby boomers, we rebelled against our parents, the traditions, all that kind of stuff, and we wanted what? New stuff. We wanted our music. And our music has found its way into the church, okay? And so children rebel against their parents. This is me, this is John Telloni talking, that I believe that the Gen Zs, in their rebellion against their Gen X and millennial parents who are into that whole scene, that they're going to rebel and say, hey, we're going to rebel against your traditions, and that what they're going to find is traditions, the old thing. It's sort of like, I think there will be a renaissance. And what was the Renaissance all about in the late Middle Ages? It was what? They discovered Greek and Latin and the old books. And so there's something new from the old. Take Josiah, right? Found the book in the temple, dusty and all that or whatever. And what happened? They said, look, this is the past. That's who we are. Past going into the future. I have a feeling this woke kind of thing, cancel culture, canceling, that forget the past, we're just going to go to the future. Well, I think the kids are going to say, this is shallow. And I think they're going to see what was good about the past, and that they will rebel in a different direction, back to the roots.
Catholic churches, yeah.
Yes, they want the liturgy, Latin, and all that kind of stuff. We're with them. We're not the Baptists with volunteers and all that kind of stuff. We are, with them. Yes, Dave.
I'm hearing that there might be a resurgence right now. But let's go back to the early 70s, when the Jesus movement. The reason the Jesus movement died is because they didn't have that foundation.
No foundation, yes.
Dogmatic, of theology.
The false things die. When they say a lie will be found out, and the truth will last. And I think there may be a resurgence in some ways with this new group of kids growing up and rebelling against what they see. And that would be something, because the mega churches and what they do, the kind of worship services they have, was a new thing, right? And maybe some of the young kids are going to rebel against that because you just rebel against your parents. And they're going to say, there's got to be something more. I just baptized an 18-year-old boy, young man. And his mother and father are separating. They stopped going to church years ago, and he really didn't have any church life in his life. He has 4 older siblings who have some church in them, but he didn't. And so as he was homeschooled too, all the kids were homeschooled, and he was the last in the line. And he was looking for some spirituality, because his mother has some spirituality, but he was looking for something. So he went to the places in our area. He went to the mega church. He went to the Methodist, Presbyterian. He had no denominational thing in mind. He just went. And then he came to St. John, and he worshiped with us, and he said, I like this. And when he started coming, he looked up Lutheranism. He started looking around for information about Lutheranism. Well, he finally came to me, and he brought his mother. He said, Ma, you got to go to church. I found a church. He brought his mother, and they were worshiping, and they went through my Life with God class. And at our festival service, the second service on Easter, I baptized him. I said, what better day? Even forget that we don't have an Easter vigil. How about on Easter day, have a baptism? He's one, and he's so thoughtful, and he's deepening his knowledge of Lutheranism. He's really into it. And he's a spiritual guy, and his mother, too. So that might be happening. Those are, little things that happen that perhaps, a little incident about what the future might be. That there may be more people like that seeking something more real, traditional, that's good and meaningful. So.
Because in the past, the reason people are going to church is because you would shop there at my store. They would make the connection that I can get. As a matter of fact, there was back in the 30s, a grain elevator man down in southern Indiana decided that he was going to quit the church because everybody in the congregation was taking their business in town where they got better rates. So he quit the church. What was he there for? Business. Not God.
Yeah. Like the businessmen who come to church and say, yeah, I'm a Christian here, but, when they go out there Monday to Friday, hey, business is business.
Was that guy a Mason too?
Yeah, probably. One of the thoughts I had is that we have to revise not the gospel, but we have to revise the way we're thinking about people. Okay? In other words, in the past, kids knew of a God. Kids knew of a sin. Today, there's nothing about that. We're still looking at evangelism and talking to people in Acts 7, where Peter comes out and all the people, and they already had a background.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that today.
And that's the lack today, the lack of a background.
Yeah. So you're going to have to come more to where Paul was in Acts 17.
Start from scratch.
Yeah, you have to start from scratch. They don't know what sin is.
And
They have no sin.
And for this young man, Leon, that's his name, Leon, he didn't have that. This is all new to him,
Yeah.
but it's like, I want more. I want more.
You find that with new Christians.
That may be happening. There's more people like that out there now that don't have that.
Trying to reach them.
When I came into the ministry in the mid-70s, I was dealing with parents who were baby boomers, okay, and they were rebelling against their parents. They made me go to church, made me go to Sunday school and all that, and so they didn't take their kids to Sunday school, okay? So I think you have these Gen Xers and millennials who don't have that background at all. If they find something, it might be very, very good for
We
us.
have more of a Greek culture than we realize.
Yeah.
That's
Who
we have
has
to
no
get that
absolute-
mindset that that's the culture we're trying to
Yes.
reach in.
And the thing is, as some pastors, and I had to tell myself this too, and go to bed and think about, man, I look out there in the sanctuary, we had people from front to back in the day. Now, there's a lot of empty seats that are empty pews. And I'm saying, thank you, Lord. Because whatever's happening, these people who are here, even a small number, No matter what, we are witnessing to the community out there who doesn't care a darn about what we're doing here. But we are here, and I would share that with you and encourage you. You are still witnessing to the world by the proclamation of the gospel and the administration of the sacraments. You are on task, and that the Lord will bless that. Somehow the Lord will bless it. I don't know how, but the Lord will bless our faithfulness in just staying the course. And we are Christ's representative too. I mean, that's our call also. We are the father shepherd of the flock, and we represent him. And we have to, make sure that we understand what we're doing, and it is worth it. Rather than say, forget this, I'm resigning. This is not what I expected. That's for young pastors, and even for some of us old timers. Can I finish the last part, 1 through 3, the common threads? And I think this is a very positive one. The healthy small church is not simply a small version of the large church. A small church is not a small version of the large church. We are different. When I was doing this in 1995 with our brothers in Canada, my assumption of a small church would be from 100 to 300. But we have to, I've changed the thing from 20, 10 to 50 or 60, 70, 80. That's a small church. Obviously, it's not a small version of a large church. Secondly, many of the statements and admonitions directed to churches in general do not apply to small churches. And the reason why I, put that in is because it just seems like, and our district is concerned about our small churches, but the thing that I thought back then, that they were not giving attention to the smaller churches. They were giving all, and then at a board of directors meeting, the percentage of time that we spend talking about our churches in the district are those churches that are growing, like the ones in Florida. We spend a lot of time talking about them, and they come for help, don't they? They come for funding and other assistance from the district, whereas the small churches are just, I wouldn't say taking being taken advantage of, or we take it for granted, but I think something needs to be said regarding churches. I heard Wally saying that yesterday. Encouraging churches. Number 3, all healthy small churches seek to live out the second of what Jesus defined as the 2 great commandments. Love your neighbor. I mean, it goes without saying that love of God is certainly part of what a small church is all about. But you talk about relationships and love. And not just loving the neighbor within, but also looking out there. That may be where congregations who are small, can take a look at how can we serve the community in small or larger ways. And then 3A, the best of the larger churches are organized primarily around the first great commandment. I think I said that before.
Around what?
What's that?
Around what? Organized around what?
The first great command, the first table of the law, love God.
1 to 3.
Yeah, 1 to 3. And then B, finally, the last one, the healthy small churches are identified as single cell organizations. Whereas in a big church, large church, that there's all kinds of different cells operating and active in the parish.
Are you talking about in terms of number of groups?
Yeah, groups and all that, different groups, yeah. Now, I gave you two articles from the Lutheran Witness, but I assume that you read the Witness. Did you see all those articles? Did you read them? So I put those in, because those had something to say about small congregation. I was glad to see it. And any comments about those?
I've also put printout on the table back there about LCEF has currently a small congregation emphasis headed by our SELC son, John Glover. It's a consultation that he does with small congregations to say, here's what LCEF can bring to that table and the understanding of and possibly approaches to congregations.
Yeah, we were talking about that at the board of directors.
So there's a handout there, just a one-side, two-sided handout.
Yeah, particular, for some people, for some of the small churches, they are stuck with a big building, like that's the Albatross at St. John Massillon. We got a big building. And the upkeep, takes a lot of funding, you know what I mean? And that's why, for instance, I asked the leadership, can we call our fellowship hall? And if you've been in our fellowship hall, that's only two-thirds of what our fellowship hall looked like before we had our preschool. It was much, we hosted the 1991 SELC District Convention, and we used the fellowship hall for our meals, and for the banquet that we had 300 people in there. But there's a wall now, so only two-thirds of the fellowship hall still exists. But we are looking at it. I said, could we call our fellowship hall the community fellowship hall? Because for us, we're getting some income from this. The Jackson Township, what is it? The AARP has their monthly luncheon. They have their executive officers meeting once a month in our building. We have what's called the Scrapbookers group, and there are people that are coming from Pittsburgh, from Cleveland, from Southern Ohio to our church for 2 days, once a month. And so our fellowship hall is filled with people who bring their boxes and everything, and they work a lot with that. The Ohio Quilters group comes in once a month for 1 day, and there's 60, 70 or more ladies who come in for quilting, and they give us, revenue. We have leased 3 of our rooms at the far end of the building in the education wing to a group, Child Evangelism Fellowship, and they pay us rent. That's the big money maker for us. But we also get people in the community that want to have a party, a place, because their home won't have, doesn't have enough space, so they come to us. They know about us, and they tell their friends, and we get lots of bookings. And, down the street at the First Christian Church, they have a smaller fellowship hall than we do, and they charge $400 if you want to rent their fellowship hall with a kitchen there. For us, we go, it's a donation of $100, per event. The scrapbookers and the quilters, they give us more than that, but that's a way we're getting revenue to keep the building going. But we also are reaching out in the community, and I said, to a couple of people in the congregation, why don't you guys join the AARP and just come over here and have a lunch? And you're members of St. John, you can, hobnob with some of these people, you get to know them. It's a way of, being in the community, I see you on Facebook from Holly. You have 2 big events, don't you, service thing. That's for the community, is it not for the whole community? What is it, rummage sale?
There's rummage sale, free clothing, and the dinner.
And the people in your congregation are committed to that. And they do it so people come in from the community. So, I mean, there's opportunities for a church to say, that's not the numerical growth, but you're just serving the community and see what happens. The guy who runs we have an AA group that comes in on Saturday. We used to have 3, but now there's just 1 for right now. Comes in on Saturday night, Ken, and he said he loves coming to the church, and I've been talking to him, about, you like this, you love this church, we can have a conversation about stuff, about faith and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a way, so our goal is not numerical growth, but I think just being a part of the community, but then it's single witness, just witness. And it's like Jacob Goggard, when he was at DML, Chicago, he had those Hispanic deaconesses from Concordia River Forest, and the one gal, that came in, and he said, the deaconess can do in the Hispanic community that I cannot do, because the men that go to work, I can't go down the streets there near around DML where the Hispanic community is and just talk to women. That's a no-no in the Hispanic community, conservative in their lifestyle, stuff like that. So the deaconess can't go there and talk to the wives and the ladies and the grandmas during the day. And the deaconess then is the one who brings them to the door of the church. And once they get to the door of the church, the pastor takes over and teaches, which is our call to convert. If that kind of evangelism, and it's not something that you just, we used to canvass the neighborhood and stuff like that, evangelism team and all that. This should just be a regular kind of a thing where people just relate to their relatives, and other people at work and so forth. And then just bring them to the church. You don't have to witness like St. Peter or Paul. Bring them to the door, and then the pastor can take it from there. That's a way of small churches can, have some liveliness. At least we're trying, Any other comments? I like the, I'm kind of looking at the first article, the handout, the ways in which congregations can, think about what their ministry is in their place. Number 1, what does the mission look like in that content, wherever you are, rural, urban, whatever, inner city? What resources has he entrusted to us? And like I said, we have a good fellowship hall, and I make it a point to see the people the groups that come in, to talk to them, just to say, here I am, and then they get to know me. What will it pay dividends? I don't know. And who are the people nearest to serve in this love? So anyway, any other final comments? I think it's past almost the time.
3 minutes.
Any other comments or questions? I hope this was some stuff, some thoughts for us and our prayers and our ministries together.
I do have one comment, and it just kind of came to mind. We talked about small churches. My first call out of seminary was as a mission developer for Hispanic youth over in the Windows, working in the mission district, specifically the Detroit area. I remember going to a missionary conference, and there was another missionary pastor in the district,
dealing with right now is I have a young man, I transferred him out of the congregation a while ago, but he has a fascination with going east, and, for a number of reasons, but I was finally able to, get through to him, he finally took my call after weeks of, just rejecting talking to anybody from the Lutheran Church. So I wanted to make this comment because it's very relevant to me right now. I do not believe the comment is accurate that the younger generations right now are rebelling against the traditions of their parents or grandparents. What I'm hearing from the young students is they are on a journey for authenticity, and that is leading them to go back to things which are ancient to them and rediscover whatever may have been buried for a time or things that they were not introduced to, and they are discovering a desire when everything in this world is being explained to them or can be found on the internet. They want something that is not explainable. They want the mystery. They don't want you to have all of the answers for everything. They are fine with saying that the Trinity cannot be fully understood, that the mystery of the body and blood and the sacramental union cannot be fully understood. And so I would caution anyone that would think it's a rebellion, as it is more the longing for what is
A
authentic.
search.
And it's a search.
Yeah, it's, well, yeah, rebellion may be too strong a word, but
I
it's a
think so.
rebellion under another name. But it's a search, a journey, authenticity. But because and the self-image that they have is not the authenticity that they're looking for.
Well, because, I mean, again, George rightly mentioned, the worship wars, the divergence from liturgical congregations. I mean, I remember the congregation that I grew up in, the contemporary service that I went to for about 20 years of my life, ended with no Apostles' Creed, no Lord's Prayer, the Lord's Supper every once in a while, led by one of the band members, and the pastor just came down and preached, and twice a month celebrated the sacrament. That's what I grew up with. And I will tell you that of this church that at one Sunday used to have 700 people every week, now is in maybe the twos, and none of the kids that went through their K-8 school, maybe a handful of them, and the kids that went to that contemporary service, they are not even Christians anymore. It pains me to see it, because I was there, and I was scared of that reality.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jacob. Again, the Leon in my congregation was on that journey for authenticity. He was looking for something. He wasn't rebelling necessarily. He was looking for something, and he found it. He found it in our church, and so forth. Okay.
So that's why I wanted to share.
Thank you. That's a good point. Yeah.
Thank you, John, very much.
Okay.
We are at 11:05. We do not have a break built in. Does anybody need a 5-10-minute break?
Let's take a 10-minute break. There's some of those breads out there, chocolate bread and blueberry bread, there's some coffee cake, have some of that for the coffee. And then let's come back at 11:15.
11:15.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Gary, I gave you the reminder.
And $25 dues for conferences. The only contributor has been Kevin so far.
I will send out a note to our brothers and brothers congregations that even if they did not attend, they need to send a $25.
opinion that the unbroken line of doctrine is more important than an unbroken line of laying out a plan. Well, that's what you have to convince them of that. Because they're willing to say that leadership within a church body is not only scripture alone, right? Because even we will say scripture alone is our doctrine, right? And from our doctrine comes practice. But we all have traditions that are outside of the scriptures. And so for them, saying scripture alone and then doing whatever we want to do liturgically doesn't make any sense. And so that's being put under fire. So you have your apostolic succession, you have your liturgical heritage, and then the validity of whatever you do following it. That's it. I mean, and that's why I think, I mean, if I postulate to say the rebellion, I don't think we will stay on the line. What are they rebelling against? You know, like multi-partisanship? I mean, just inventing churches. I mean, yeah, oh, they rebel. I mean, if that's the rebellion, then yeah, I'd probably be part of it too. But no, they want to know that they are connected to the church pastor living or departed.
Well, we should be the ones who, that's our thing, right? I mean, scripture alone. And, but, okay, well, it's interesting, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why I think I have so I have a ton of people exploring like the church fathers, and we were on Saturday night now. We started studying the Apocrypha, because that's a very good resource as well. And it's just like, instead of being so scared to talk about any of these things, we just have to start bringing it up. Like, not everything that the church fathers said is good. I know, and not everything that Luther said is good either. I mean, he celebrates these things though, as being like there are pastors from every generation that are worth listening to, even though they probably know about the faith. And many of them, even Luther and Gerhard, were so familiar with the Apocrypha that they made comments on it in a book. It's in every one of your doctrinal books. It's in Peter, it's in Walter. I mean, like, if we can't learn to just be comfortable around wisdom literature, I mean, then people say, well, what's your reason for not using it? Like, how can Rome use it? How can the East use it? And then we just say, yeah, no. So it just doesn't, I think they see that we, perhaps in the Lutheran Church, there's an overreaction on the other side of the church. And so they're saying, well, what's real? And the fact too, I think one of the bigger things that we're struggling with now is ecclesiastical autonomy.
Yeah, I know.
You know, how many of these churches have been left to do whatever they want to do without any. And so it takes me 2 hours to go to church for some people.
question, Donnie?
So, no, the fee is only for active
Yeah, retire, they stop charging.
retirees,
Oh,
we don't
oh,
charge
good.
any fee.
Oh, good. Also, those that are retired like me
That's
don't
right,
have to pay?
that's right.
All right.
So all I have to do is retire, but I'm gonna do the same thing
I
I'm
thought
doing.
you were retired.
Right after I retire, I'm gonna be doing the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah, but then you'll get benefits.
You may consider yourself retired, but as long as you're an active pastor.
Yes,
of
I know.
congregation, you are an active pastor. Like that's me too.
I've told
Uncle
them,
Sam sees me as retired, but, because
Even-
Missouri Synod says I'm an active pastor.
Even when you're retired and you're getting an income from preaching once in a while, Uncle Sam has his share.
oh yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
I'm still waiting for them to stop taxing Social Security.
It's being promised.
I know, they're talking about it. Yeah, I'm too lazy to make quarterly payments. So every April, it's a very painful
Oh,
situation.
I know.
Has been for 12 years and will continue to be. Not that I'm too lazy, it's just I don't like getting the government running ahead of time.
That's right. They take your money and
They put it to bank.
They get interest on that. Yeah, I used to do that. And, my daughter said, well, why don't you do online banking and do all that stuff online and all that. I said, well, so during my rehab years, once she started doing it, so she's still, my daughter does it for me, so I don't have to worry about it, so.
You're blessed to have a daughter.
Oh, she's a blessing. Yeah.
Thank you for that presentation. I hope I didn't.
No, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, walks, questions, whatever, that's good.
Well, I'm definitely a man that has comments.
Well, that's good, that's good.
I hope those new banners work out.
I hope so,
I-
as long as the rain doesn't.
How bad is are they still up?
Oh, yeah, they're still up.
How bad?
The second one is still kind of okay to see,
Okay.
but yeah, the other one is pretty much, what is that?
I hope the black, the book says the black,
Rain resistant,
the
right?
black says it's waterproof. The
Okay.
other colors are not listed that way. So, let's hope it works that way.
I hope so.
I have found out, John, though, that you can actually order banners online for even cheaper than I can offer them.
No.
Yeah.
It's unreal, there's out there and people say, no.
I mean, if you, I know you don't shop Temu, nobody can, well, I
don't even know what you're
shop,
talking about.
I shop Temu. And,
Nobody who has any sense of sense.
well, everything is from Temu is a knockoff of an original, so yeah, somebody's getting ripped off.
Oh, this microphone is still hot, so
Yeah.
this is all going out on the
Don't worry,
internet.
Are they
It's all
watching
true.
us here?
They're watching us through
It's
this.
all truth, but
I might have to
anyway.
edit this
But,
video.
I got a hold of now. You know the businesses when they go out and do conventions, they have these banners that you are on rollers that they just
Yeah.
lift up.
Right.
Okay. I bought one for $20 for church for our rummage sale. That's coming up in okay.
Junk for Jesus.
The banner is an unbelievable quality. The little roller is a piece of junk. so bad that even if you get it to stand up, it blows over or not to a fall. I mean, it doesn't have enough weight to support itself.
Okay, 3 golf clubs go into a bar. Now, those 3 golf clubs are there. The putter goes in and says, I want a gin and tonic. The wedge says, I'll have a beer. The 3rd golf club goes, I'll have water. Bartender goes, I don't understand. Your other guy said mixed drinks, why aren't you? I'm the driver.
I'm the
I'm the driver.
I'm the designated driver.
Hey, Chris, who made your daughter's will? Those 2 guys.
Nancy Brown made those.
Nancy Brown.
She was one of the ladies in this.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I think we had our rummage sale, I don't know, it's upstairs. We have all the stuff Joe said he used for making them. Patterns and felt and everything else, so if anybody needs it.
In my second parish, about 10 o'clock at night, I walked back to the graveyard because I saw some activity. 3 boys, 2 of them drinking. I said, you should be doing that back here at the cemetery. Oh, we gotta visit these, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Spanish magician, he's out there. He gets on the stage. He goes, uno, dos, and he disappeared in their face. Without a trace.
People get
Yeah,
laughed.
we get it.
I
We
mean,
get
like,
it.
who would laugh at him? He would, he'd stop, wouldn't he?
I got a million of them.
No, he won't stop.
I won't stop.
Katie's father-in-law has,
Oh, no.
Always has
Dad
a
jokes. The dad jokes.
he always has a joke. And no, they're worse than dad jokes. So the way this works is, the family gets together and they'll look at one of the grandkids and, so did I tell you the joke about the geese? And grandma's like, no, don't tell the joke about the geese, Dad.
Keep it clean. You know how hard it is to find clean jokes, though?
Well, and we're talking, the grandsons are almost all graduated from college, so they don't care whether the joke's clean or not, but Carolyn is just,
Even the dad joke books have bad jokes.
they're not dirty, they're just bad. We call those, in our family, we call them old Herbie jokes, because my grandpa's name was Herb, and he would start on one of them, and his favorite was, how do you make antifreeze?
Take her outside.
Take her nightie away in the wintertime. And he'd get about that far, take her nightie, and grandma would go, oh, Herb! The children.
Makes sense, though.
All right. Here you go, sir. 25, right? Yeah, just put them out there first.
Okay, brothers.
Okay.
You're gonna send a thing out, and if you do, you think put it so that it looks like a bill.
Oh.
I'll give it to the treasurer.
I'll put it this way. You'll pay the